Morley Robbins, welcome back to the podcast. Lovely to have you. Fifth time, if I'm correct,
Oh,
Morley.
wow. That's
I,
awesome. That's
I,
fantastic. I had no idea.
I know
Yeah,
every
thrilled to be
few
here.
months, you have to get your Irish fix, and I have to get my Morley fix.
That's exactly right.
And you
Well,
got
I'm
your
glad.
green background and all for this conversation.
Well, that's my Irish fix, right?
Exactly. Yeah, when I'm not around.
Exactly.
Oh, what's happening, Morley?
I'm out on the West Coast right now, just catching up with a bunch of different people here we're down in the Los Angeles area. We're down in Mission Viejo. We were in Santa Monica, came back to Sacramento, then went back down to Santa Cruz. We've got a couple more. We had a meeting in Folsom, so we've been kind of dotting all the little spots around California and having a lot of great discussions. It's been a lot of fun.
That's a lot of driving, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's you know we get it done.
Well, it gives
So
you
it's
something to do.
that's exactly right. Keep me occupied, keep me out of the library.
Yeah, keep you out of trouble.
That's right.
Oh, well, I was talking to you on email a few weeks ago and mentioned I'd like to have a discussion with you around a few things,
Yeah,
starting though with adrenal fatigue. And you mentioned, what did you say to me? You broke your teeth on it or some term like that?
yeah. Got my teeth on adrenal fatigue. Absolutely. No,
Oh,
with
yeah.
yeah. No, it's again. I think it's a term that's been abused. I think as soon as people start to feel fatigue, they just assume it's the adrenals that are blowing out. And so when I got started, I was doing a lot of hair tissue mineral analysis, and you can pick up adrenal fatigue pretty quickly. It's the ratio of sodium to magnesium, and the key is understanding that 95%, so they say, 95% of the whole food vitamin C that's stored in our body is stored in the adrenal glands. Well, when you begin to peel that back, what they're really talking about is tyrosinase. Tyrosinase is a very important copper enzyme that is found in the center of the whole food vitamin C complex. So you've got tyrosinase is the little engine, and then you've got P factors and J factors and K factors, which are all like the bioflavonoids and rutin and things like that. And then the outer shell is ascorbic acid. And so everyone has been trained to believe that ascorbic acid is the same thing as whole food vitamin C, and it's not. They're, one is a car, and the other is just the shell of the car. And it's really important for people to know the difference between the two. And the most intriguing definition of adrenal fatigue comes by way of Tom Cowan, who's I think he's now retired, but he was a very prominent physician in the Bay Area for many years, and he used to call adrenal fatigue fat deficiency syndrome. And it took me a while to figure out what is he
Yeah.
referring. What he's really referring to is retinol, which is preformed vitamin A that we get from cod liver oil, from beef liver, from yard eggs, things like that. And that vitamin A is so critically important for metabolizing iron in the body, especially iron. And but it's also really important for activating copper. The retinol um, has four different hormones that it can turn into, and they're called retinoic acids. And one of those retinoic acids, 13 cis retinoic acid, is instrumental for firing up the copper loading enzymes ATP7A and ATP7B. Well, 7B is what makes ceruloplasmin, the master antioxidant protein, but 7A is making everything else. I mean, all people have been trained to believe that copper is toxic, right? We all know it's toxic. When in fact it's the exact opposite. And the copper enzymes like superoxide dismutase, catalase, peroxidase, cytochrome C oxidase, the PAM enzyme. I won't get into the 36 letters of the PAM enzyme, but these are these are mission critical enzymes, and we're supposed to believe that copper is toxic, but the
Mhm.
body doesn't work without it, especially the adrenal gland. And so you can't um, the whole mechanism of adrenaline. This is called both cortisol and adrenaline are made in the adrenal glands, but adrenaline can't be made without copper. It's impossible to make it. You got to turn dopamine into adrenaline. And so the adrenal response, the adrenal fatigue is the failure to make those conversions. And the um, the concept of adrenal fatigue is just, I think it's a overused term, but what we talk about within the root cause protocol is the importance of the adrenal cocktails that remineralize the body. We put particular emphasis on magnesium and sodium and potassium. And we're also really very much focused on whole food vitamin C, but we also talk about the retinol as well. And so I think all five of those factors are critical. And then there's another factor that people really resist. It's called vitamin Z, as in Z,
Mhm.
as in sleep. And so people fight that the way you really need to recover the adrenal glands is by getting more rest and
Yeah.
parasympathetic response. And I fought that tooth and nail. But when I finally started to get 8 or 9 hours sleep, my adrenals perked right back up, and they're
The
fine now.
average recommendation for women with adrenal fatigue is 10 to 12 hours of sleep.
Wow.
And you really see the difference. You do. It's just getting people to do that. That's the
It's
challenge.
well, sure, they've got to unplug from the world to do that.
Mhm.
They've got to be in bed no later than 10. And then
That's late for me, Morley. I go to bed at 8:30.
well, I'm usually getting ready for bed around 9 or 9:30, so not too far behind. But that's a tall order for most people. Because
Mm.
the question I always ask my clients is, when does your when I have two questions. When do you go to bed? When does your head hit the pillow?
Yeah.
And,
Oh, and
and people,
sleep latency. How long then does it take you to fall asleep when your head hits the
right?
pillow? Because some people are lying there
Yeah,
staring at the ceiling for an hour thinking of their list to do. So I have a few questions, Morley. One, do you think the term adrenal fatigue is a valid term? And then the other one is with you said, so the hair mineral analysis test, and I do those as well, but the ratio you're looking at, you said it's pretty easy to diagnose. Is that
right.
going to be extremely high magnesium and low sodium, the ratio you're looking at?
Typically, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Or
right.
or or you're going to have extremely low levels of sodium and low levels of magnesium. Um, I mean, typically you won't see both of them low,
Mm.
but when what people need to know is that there's a what do we call it? There's an alarm state, there's a resistance state, and I think is a collapse. I'm trying to remember Hans Selye's research now, but there's three prominent
The
phases.
three phases of adrenal
Yeah,
fatigue.
right. And so in the first phase, the alarm phase, sodium is shooting up like a rocket, and magnesium is still low. And so you've got this very high adrenal ratio. Then in the resistance stage, um, magnesium is rising to match the sodium, and you're gonna get back into some level of parity. And then the body can only do that so long, and then there's a point where it just collapses, and the ratios or the minerals just come down as expressed in the hair. And so um, Dr. Selye did 30,000 animal experiments to document that three-phase response. And the thing is, the adrenal cocktails that we talk about that we recommend in the RCP, they're very effective at helping to restore mineral status, restore calm. The mistake that people make when they first learn about minerals and they learn that magnesium is important for adrenal response is that they'll start to flood the body with magnesium, not knowing that they need to also have the sodium and potassium there.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
if you have too much magnesium, then the ratio gets inverted, and then you are really dealing with severe fatigue. It's debilitating, but it's very easily corrected with proper mineral support.
What do you think
So
about people with adrenal issues who add in something like Celtic sea salt and they end up getting a racing heart? Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that. That's a new twist. Um, that would suggest that their magnesium must be pretty low. I mean, they're overstimulating their sympathetic response. Um, I think the two thoughts. One is people just need to be a little bit more cautious about trying to correct this. You have to be very careful about both the sodium and the magnesium.
Mhm.
And then the other side of it is um, there's all sorts of adaptogens that you can get. Um, there's adrenal products. There's all sorts of herbal products, and I just think people tend to flog their adrenals more than they need. I think the adrenal glands respond beautifully to rest, to proper nutrition, and moderate mineral supplementation. You don't need to overdo it. And I think people get into a panic and think they've got to use all sorts of herbal products or supplements. I don't think that's necessary.
Because most people are desperate at that stage, and
Mhm.
that's where they will start to ask me, what do I think of this adaptogen or this herb or the
Right,
and I still come back to what I said to you. The very first recommendation is, are you sleeping? Can you sleep more? Can you
right,
rest? Like
yeah,
that really is the prescription. Um,
yeah.
but
No, that's exactly right.
I think I lost you there, Morley. Can you hear me?
Okay, wonderful. All right. No, I think it's important for people just to relax, that the body will respond to the nutrition, the body will respond to the rest, the body will respond to the lowering of stress in their lives. Uh, I think people need to really invest time and energy into emotional release techniques like EFT, an emotion code, or integrated processing technique. These are really important tools to help us stave off the fear that we're living in because we're so stressed out. And that fear, it really plays a number on our metabolism big
Yeah.
time.
It's such a challenge for most people because we're saying you need to slow down and rest and sleep, but they can't because whatever way their life is designed, their daily
Right?
schedule, and that is unfortunate, but it becomes a case of, well, pick your poison. Do you want
That's
to
right.
keep feeling rubbish or do you want to fix this? You have to, well, then, and I know it's easier said than done, but you will have to cut some things out of your day. You'll have to prioritize getting to bed an hour earlier. You'll have to stop running first thing in the morning and sleep in instead. Like you'll have to pick and choose your battles.
But no, that's exactly right. And I think the people who come to that realization really benefit and they respond. The body is incredibly resilient, but you do need to make those choices. You're absolutely right.
I think the adaptogens in some cases, and I'm quite conservative when I say stuff like this, they can be helpful in context, but I don't think they should be our primary focus. I really
No,
do think the nutrients and the minerals and the rest are better,
right.
restoring them. So if you had to pick like specific nutrients and minerals, Morley, let's just say five that you would use to help with the adrenals, what would they be?
Well, the most important are going to be the minerals, the magnesium, the sodium, and the potassium. Um, really important to have whole food vitamin C. That's very, very, very critical. And I think the fifth would be the retinol, the either the cod liver oil and or the beef liver or desiccated beef liver, however you're taking it, would be just significantly uh, restorative to adrenal function. I mean, you can begin to get into, I mean, the one adaptogen that I have had success with is ashwagandha, and I don't recommend it for everyone, but on occasion it's just good for people to have that support. And the beauty of the adaptogen is it has that name because it's responsive to the situation, and it can adapt to your state of balance or imbalance. But Gaia Earths used to have, I think they still do it. I think it was like 650 milligrams of ashwagandha, and I had a lot of clients who really enjoyed that, found that to be a value. But again, it's a short-term stimulus. It's not a lifestyle change that you're living on ashwagandha for the rest of your life.
Hmm. I prefer Tulsi or Holy Basil. I
That's, yep,
find it to be
those are
more
great.
effective. A lot of the people that I work with, they don't do well on ashwagandha because it overstimulates their estrogen
Hmm.
activity. But
Okay, that's
Tulsi
fair.
is a strong adaptogen, and I like that just to help push down the stress response in the evening and help them with sleep. But it's not the panacea. They still have to do the other stuff. They still have to avoid the blue light before bed, do some
Right.
sort of stress management technique, whether that's have a bath or read a book or pray or
Hmm.
whatever they choose. Like these tools can help to an extent, but there has to be a lifestyle practice as well.
Absolutely, it's essential. And and I think the people who really bounce back make that change, and then they find how important it really is.
And how much more important it is to like read a book rather than watch Netflix in the evening. Like when you feel the benefits, you start to go, "Oh, okay."
That's right. That's exactly right. That's very true.
What about people, Morley? Um, who go and do all these tests, and half the time they don't get any answers from the test, but they see that they have low ferritin, and the doctor or some good intentioned person says, "Oh, well, when my iron was low or my ferritin was low, I was exhausted, so I took more iron and ferritin, and that really helped me recover my fatigue."
Yeah, it's a mirage, just like you're out in the desert and you're convinced you see this oasis up ahead. Um, it's not real. Um, there's a wonderful study done by Robert Hodges from 1978. Oh, wow, that's really old. Why would you quote something that's so? But it's a very powerful study over an almost 4 year period of different human subjects and how they responded to the withdrawal of retinol and beta carotene from their diet, how devastating the impact was on their iron metabolism, especially hemoglobin. That's what they were measuring in this particular study. Um, and what Dr. Hodges elected to do about 2.5 years into the study was give them medicinal levels of iron infusion.
Okay.
And and what happened, as you would expect, there was this uptick in red blood cells. But what's important to understand is that any heavy metal, cadmium, lead, mercury, you infuse that into a human being, and there's going to be the same uptick in red blood cells. It's just that's the body's response to that stimulus.
Is it
And it
like
only
an
lasts,
immune response? A
I,
protective mechanism.
that's exactly what I think it is.
Yeah.
And the effect is only 6 weeks long. And as soon as at 6 weeks, it'll peak and then it'll start to collapse. And then what he was able to prove in this study was that the use of retinol or beta carotene was what caused this dramatic uptick in hemoglobin and the restoring of the um, iron metabolism. The idea that people are saying, I feel better when I take iron, I think to some extent we've got a placebo effect going. They're
Mm.
so conditioned to thinking that, and you could give them a sugar pill and they probably would feel better.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think what's happening is people are not aware of a very important hormone. It's an iron hormone called hepcidin, and most people have never heard of it. Most doctors have never heard of it. And hepcidin is a very powerful player in our body because it's what shuts down the iron recycling system. And a lot of people have been led to believe that they have what I'll call absolute iron deficiency, which I think is very rare on this planet, especially in the age of iron fortification, iron supplementation, iron
Hmm.
invasions through infusions. And the idea that someone, I think it's now 80 countries, over half of the countries in the planet now mandate iron fortification of grains, which is pretty dramatic. And so this idea
Why
that,
would we do, even if that was the case, that iron was low and needed to be fortified in our food, why aren't we just telling people eat more red meat? The big
well,
green agenda, maybe?
the big the big green agenda, and animals are bad for you, don't you know? I mean, there
Yeah.
aren't enough animals to go around, right? And so people are being told that this non-heme form of iron is good for you. It's not. It's very difficult for the body to metabolize it, much more difficult than the heme iron. And the illusion is that this constant dosing of iron is going to solve their problem, when in fact, what most people are suffering from is not absolute iron deficiency. They're suffering from functional iron deficiency. And the mechanism of action is lack of proper recycling because of a lack of bioavailable copper. And it's very well documented in the literature that the concept of the terms that are used, anemia of chronic disease, anemia of inflammation, these are all referring to an increased inflammatory state, which causes ferritin to go down, by the way.
Hmm.
Ferritin will drop in an inflammatory state, but it's also regarded as not a very accurate depiction of iron status. Uh, Hemoglobin will always be the best go-to to assess iron situations in the body, and the ferritin protein is being hijacked by especially obstetricians and pediatricians, and I think is being overly prescribed. The amount of iron that's being prescribed is staggering. But the key is recognizing that ferritin is not supposed to be in the blood. It's supposed to be in the cell. It's supposed to
Hmm.
be out of the blood, and they've twisted this mechanism that everyone believes they're supposed to have a certain level of ferritin. Oh, your thyroid's going to work better. Your hair loss is going to be so much better, and it's all based on a complete misunderstanding about the presence of ferritin in the blood.
Yeah, normally we see lower ferritin is associated with lower thyroid function and more hair loss. And it all comes
Right.
down to the inflammation and the metabolic dysfunction that's happening, that it's
Right.
all getting stuck in the tissue, as we spoke about before, and can't be liberated. So therefore, when you test it in the bloodstream, it looks like you've low ferritin, but in fact, it's all trapped inside the tissues.
Yeah, and the way I would explain it relative to the thyroid, um, what causes hypothyroidism? Was actually lack of retinol. If you don't have retinol, it needs to be turned into our one of the key retinoids that's made from retinol. It's called RXR. It's a nuclear receptor that's absolutely essential, that needs to be paired up with the thyroxine receptor
Mhm.
in order to stabilize things so that you can transcribe thyroxine hormone. It's really very, very important. And if you don't have RXR, you're not going to have thyroid function. And so the idea of low ferritin being the problem, no, that's not the problem. The problem is lack of retinol. And what I've come to piece together is that when the ferritin goes low, it typically means that the spleen is under stress.
Mhm.
And when the spleen is under stress, it's not clearing the pathogens, especially the parasites, as efficiently as it would otherwise. Why is the spleen down? Because there's too much iron. The iron is building in the spleen. It's affecting what's called the white pulp of the spleen. You have red pulp and white pulp, and the white pulp is being overwhelmed by the amount of iron. Parasites are building. What do parasites like to do? They like to consume retinol. They have an affinity for retinol as food. I'm not quite sure why. I really need to look into that. But the retinol goes south, and then the thyroid goes south. And it has nothing to do with low thyroid causes low ferritin. It's actually lack of bioavailable copper causes parasites, which then affect the spleen, which then affects the thyroid. And it's a very different mechanism of action that makes so much more sense than this idea that this bow tie in our throat is running the body. It just that to me is one of the greatest scams of modern medicine, is thinking that the thyroid runs the body when it doesn't.
So copper controls parasites because that's what copper
Mm-hmm.
does. But somebody asked me about a copper cleanse, not a copper cleanse, parasite cleanse this
Yeah.
morning.
Right.
Um, and I was explaining to her, like, if your body is well equipped to do the job, you don't need to buy any of these expensive parasite cleanses unless there is an obvious tapeworm or a ringworm.
Right. That's
Then
exactly.
like your body should be equipped to take care of this stuff by itself. That's one thing that I think is kind of a scam, are these parasite cleanses.
Yeah. No, I'm not. The body has tremendous capacity to detox itself.
Mhm.
There's a blueprint in our immune system for detoxing. What does it require? It requires energy. Well, how do we make energy? We got to have the right nutrients in our diet, especially the minerals and the critical vitamins, like especially vitamin A and whole food vitamin C. And bingo bongo, the body knows exactly what to do to detox. It's just we've been led to believe that our body's broken, we're stupid, we don't know what to do, and we can't live without this particular detox. And I'm with you. I don't buy it. I don't think there's a need for that.
Yeah. So then morally back to the thyroid, and if you don't think the thyroid is the master regulator per se, the thyroid is directly influencing detox pathways to work properly. So
Well,
what?
here's what I think is really going on, and this is based on the research of Jens Maytag, who is a very gifted endocrinologist in Germany, and wrote a very important article in 2012. The thyroid hormone, the active hormone, T3, it's not a spark plug inside the mitochondria. That's all a nursery rhyme. It is an oxygen sensor, and it's really detecting, is oxidative stress building in the mitochondria. And it's a very different thought process that it's looking for oxygen or reactive oxygen species. And the way Dr. Maytag explains it, and it makes so much sense, all hormones are signaling peptides. And so when the T3 triiodine hormone begins to sense a buildup of oxidative stress, it sends a signal back to the liver. And the signal is we need more ceruloplasmin being made in the liver to bring more copper to the mitochondria, because one of the key functions of the ceruloplasmin protein is to deliver copper to the mitochondria. And the mitochondria have 50,000 atoms of copper inside each mitochondrial matrix. And it's the restoring of copper status that then alleviates the oxidative stress. And, and then you're, instead of creating oxidative stress or reactive oxygen species like superoxide or hydrogen peroxide or the hydroxyl radical, what the mitochondria is designed to do is to turn an oxygen molecule, O2, into two molecules of water, 2H2O. And when that happens, it releases 3 ADP from complex 4 to go over to complex 5 to become 3 magnesium ATP. I think it's the most important transaction in our body is the ability to convert the oxygen into water. It's a copper dependent function. And apparently it's not taught sufficiently in practitioner schools because they don't seem to understand where energy is coming from. It's
Mm,
not it's not rocket science, but it's a very profound conversion of turning oxygen into water, and we can't live without it.
mhm. So how does this relate then, Morley, to one of our other topics today, the body fat switch? I mean, it sounds like that is the body fat switch in itself. If you can upregulate ATP conversion, you've you've got like the metaphorical magic pill there for weight loss.
Well, it's not the case. What you've got, as it relates to the fat switch, you have the work of Rick Johnson, who's a famous nephrologist at University of Colorado in Denver. You have the work of Chris Chang out at Berkeley, and you have the work of Svetlana Lutsenko at Hopkins. And Rick Johnson's, he's published many, many articles on uric acid, but he wrote a really important book called Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. It's a wonderful read. And there's a critical um, diagram in that book. I'm blanking on the actual number or what figure it is, but it's one of the early ones, like figure 1, 2, or 3, something like that. But when we're under stress, the body is converting glucose into fructose. That's a big change. When the body changes glucose into fructose, it's going down a completely different metabolic pathway, and we're no longer in the safe world of glucose metabolism. We're in a very different world where we're based on ARYL hydrocarbons, and it's a very different pathway that's being used to metabolize. Well, the first thing that happens when we're working with fructose is it needs to be made into sorbitol. That's a big development. That's an alcohol sugar or sugar alcohol.
Mhm.
And what does sorbitol do? It chelates copper. It chelates 98% of the copper around it. Well, then you're really beginning to undermine the ability of the body to metabolize the food that's being eaten, especially the fats. And there's a key mechanism. There is a fat switch that needs to be kept in check by the presence of copper. PDE3, very important phosphodiesterase. And when copper is present, it puts a brake on the resistance to burn fat. And the other side of it is the whole process of breaking down fats. It's called beta oxidation metabolism. And you can't, the beta oxidation mechanism doesn't work without copper. So if we're in a state of heightened stress, we're converting our glucose into fructose, we're losing our copper, we're losing the mechanism to keep the fat metabolism burning properly. And then there's just this metabolic breakdown in how the body responds to stress. And both Svetlana Lutsenko and Chris Chang have documented without any doubt that copper is essential for burning fat. You cannot break down the lipids properly without the presence of bioavailable copper. And that syncs up beautifully with the research from 1973 by Leslie Clave, who discovered, just as the statin engines were being cranked up, but he found out that in 1973 that if you have a copper deficiency in the body, it's going to upregulate the production of cholesterol. Well, why is that happening? It's that cholesterol is an oxygen sink. So it takes 11 molecules of oxygen to make one molecule of cholesterol. So if the body is sensing that oxygen is not being activated properly because of a lack of copper, it's going to start to mobilize the mechanism, especially in the liver, to make increased amounts of cholesterol. And so then cholesterol is rising, triglycerides are rising. Again, it's a copper dependent function that's at play. And for his findings back in 1973 to become science, only one other lab needed to verify it. Since 1973, over 30 labs have verified that Dr. Clave was right, that in fact, lack of copper causes this lipid response. And it's a complete mystery to conventional medicine. They believe in disease. They believe in cholesterol as some kind of a response to disease, when in fact it's a mineral dysregulation that's taking place that's causing these metabolic responses.
Well, there is a proposal by many other doctors, as I'm sure you know, like Dr. Broda Barnes, stating how low thyroid, low cop or high cop, excuse me, low thyroid, high cholesterol goes hand in hand. But now,
Right.
I mean, it could in a feedback loop through the low copper aspects. Low copper, low thyroid function, high cholesterol.
Right. Rhoda Barnes was a genius. He was an amazing physician. I think during his 40 years as a doctor, he only lost two patients, and both of those patients were lost when he was on vacation. So he didn't actually lose them. But and he relied extensively on Armour Thyroid, as you probably know. What did Broda Barnes not focus on? He didn't focus on minerals. And so again, there's this whole thought process around thyroid runs the body. And so he was worshiping at that altar. And so he made sure that he optimized people's thyroid, when in fact, what he was really doing was optimizing their copper, but he didn't know that. And so I'm absolutely convinced that Jens Maytag is right about the role of the thyroid hormone. There is no T3 mechanism in the electron transport chain.
So,
T3 hangs out in the electron transport chain, but it's not a catalytic agent to turn oxygen into water. That is not happening inside the mitochondria.
so is natural desiccated thyroid quite high in copper, Morley?
Well, I don't know if it's high in copper. I think it's creating this illusion that if copper and ceruloplasmin are ensuring optimal expression of the thyroid hormone, what he was doing was keeping this optimal expression of thyroid alive in the body, and then staving off any kind of untoward response by cholesterol rising, fatigue coming, things like that. And so it's what we're really striving to do within the root cause protocol is get to the root cause. We don't want to create this illusion that we need to worship our thyroid, and where this really stems from. I wasn't aware of this at all, but when we really began to roll out the root cause protocol, people found that they didn't need as much thyroid support as they had historically. Many people found out they didn't need any thyroid support. And what were we focusing on? Restoring minerals in general, but especially restoring magnesium and copper. And then as we began to get into it, we realized, oh my gosh, so we're really at a foundational level restoring the mineral balance in the body, and it's affecting a lot of tissue, not just the thyroid.
Back to what we were saying in the start of the conversation, the adrenals very much need that optimal magnesium. And I'm just thinking of that client that had the heart palpitations with the salt. Then we could argue that to recover the adrenals, copper is also essential.
Oh, it is. It's in the whole food vitamin C. The very center of the vitamin C molecule, the complex, is tyrosinase, and there's two atoms of copper inside tyrosinase enzyme. So again, the world of convention has this narrative about how the body works. All we've done within the root cause protocol is get to a deeper level of understanding, and think of it as like different languages. And so, Latin, and maybe before Latin would be Greek, but Latin became the root language for so many languages around the world. And so all we're trying to do is explain how mineral metabolism is in fact the language of metabolism of the body. And it isn't that one is right or wrong. It's just that what's the origin, what's the point of where the process starts is really what we're focusing on within our work.
I spoke with, do you know, Wade Lightheart by Optimizers?
No, I don't.
Well,
Oh,
they pretty much make a mineral and enzyme line of supplements. And I was saying to him, pretty much what we're saying here is that I think if you just take a boatload of minerals, you will fix a lot of your problems and then follow it closely by enzymes to help everything work better. And you'd be doing a good job there with sleep, of course.
well, sure. No, that's very true. I think what we're trying to do is get people to get a healthy diet to the extent that they can find the right sources of food, ancestral sources of food, and make sure that they are really being strategic about the use of the minerals and the vitamins and sort of get out of the way. I mean, I I know people who rely on enzymes, but enzymes have catalysts. Catalysts, almost without exception, are either minerals or vitamins.
Mhm.
So I'd much rather give someone the precursor and let their body do the work before relying on some manufactured process.
With the body fat switch, Morley, as you're speaking, I was thinking of, well, where are we sourcing all of this copper the majority of the time? If it's not from our red meats, we know that meat is good for weight loss, but green vegetables. Most people, when they eat a lot of green vegetables, if they're on a diet, like
Mhm.
if they're eating a lot, like for lunch is a salad, and then we've got a lot of green vegetables at dinner, they tend to see more weight loss when they do that. And we could argue, well, because they're so low in calories, we're creating a calorie deficit, or they're going to be higher in fiber, so you can eat more and stay fuller for longer, and they stabilize blood sugars and all that. So there's multiple arguments, but part of the argument now from what you're saying is there's a copper element here that is being overlooked for weight loss in regards to eating a lot of green vegetables.
Well, the leafy greens historically have been a great source of copper. Your mustard greens, collard greens, beet greens, they're those plants are very rich in copper. I mean, they don't rival organ meats in terms of beef liver or something as nutrient dense as cod liver oil, but those leafy greens are very nutrient dense, and the copper dynamic has been methodically downplayed for a century.
Mm.
It is to me, it's one of the great deceptions on the planet is people have been trained to think that they're anemic and that they're copper toxic, when in fact the truth is just the opposite. Most people are copper deserts, and because they're copper deserts, they have high states of functional iron deficiency, and they're swimming in iron. It's stuck in their tissue. It's not showing up in the recycling system nor in the blood work that they're doing. So people just need to be careful not to be fooled by a low iron on a blood test, because what it's masking is high iron in the tissue that isn't being measured.
Mhm.
That's the bottom line.
Do we think that if we got people back to like the good nutrition, but definitely emphasizing a lot more on green vegetables, regardless of doing anything else, that you would see an improvement then in the hemoglobin, the iron, the ferritin on a blood panel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge we've got today is I'm not sure there's enough just in the green vegetables. I think we do need the organ meats. I think we do need, and I think we're really faced with in a post glyphosate world, we need to be actively supplementing with copper, actively supplementing with magnesium so that we get the critical minerals that are so important for energy production because the prevalence of glyphosate is far more extensive than people realize. And it is worldwide. It's not just on commercial farms. It's not just a little bit. And so the research is bearing out that, at a very high level, as high as 99% of people, like in France in a 2022 study, are peeing glyphosate in their urine. Well, that's a very unsettling reality. And so people don't like to hear that.
Well, we find
But
it in placenta now.
yeah, right. No, and I was just talking to a acupuncturist on the West Coast, and she's very meticulous with her diet. She's finding it in her body now. She says, I never eat anything that even has remotely any hint of glyphosate. So it's much more
Everywhere.
pervasive than people realize. That's
Yeah.
right.
So that just back to the hepcidin, because we're just kind of touching on blood panels right now. If we tested hepcidin on a blood panel, is that going to be a better marker of what's really going on? And I know you're going to say yes, but if it's high, if the hepcidin is high, then we can say there's not actually no anemia here. What we have is a problem here with the hepcidin.
Right. So the very important article for people to read is by Elizabetta Nemeth and Thomas Gans from 2010. They're at UCLA, and it's really talking about the um, the dynamic of the hepcidin molecule. And the last page of the article is it's everything, and they have a diagram showing that um, under where hepcidin is normally, it's about 100. When hepcidin is high, it's about 1,000. And when hepcidin is low, it's about 10.
Okay.
And so, but the key is that when hepcidin gets really high, and it will get really high, that is a state of inflammation, which means that the copper is stuck in the recycling system and it's not showing up on the blood work. When hepcidin is really, really low, it means there is an absolute deficiency of iron. And here's the catch. Doctors don't do that blood test.
That's what I was going to
Doctors doctors do not know what hepcidin is. They really don't. You talk to your doctor about getting a hepcidin test, and they won't know what you're talking about. And so,
But with the lab, if a doctor did put it on a requisition, would the lab know what to do?
oh, of course, the lab would know.
So
But
if you could
but
convince the doctor to do it, you might be onto something.
right, but it's not an inexpensive test. If you want to do a interleukin 6, which is a very important cytokine that triggers a rise of hepcidin, if you do those together, you're going to spend about $600. It's a very expensive combination
Not
because
an
you want you.
Alberta health thing.
Okay, well, I would be shocked if you could get a hepcidin blood test in Canada. I would be really surprised if you could pull that off. And I mean, to me, it should be a standard blood test. And here's the catch: if hepcidin is high on a blood test, it'll show low in the urine. Now, doctors don't know that low in the urine means that it's high in the blood. And so there's a lot of confusion about that. They don't track together in blood and urine. And so low urinary hepcidin is a serious problem. And so it's just the switchbacks and the confusion is just central to this whole discussion. But I think for people to realize that if they've been told that they are, quote, anemic because they have low ferritin, then I would demand a Heepsidon blood test. And and if it's up at uh, going on to 1,000, well, I know that that's an inflammatory response because the recycling system has been shut down. And so people just need to know what they're up against. The, the fact that we can't do this blood test, to me, is a red flag. The fact that we can't readily measure the ferroxidase assay of ceruloplasmin, that's another red flag. Why aren't we measuring this foundational um, enzyme that will dictate whether our copper and iron are working properly together? And if ferroxidase is off, the whole mechanism of regulating copper and iron is lost. It's like, well, that would be a good thing to know. Why are we keeping that under wraps? I mean, I do know why, because there's no money in a healthy human, but it just seems like we're beyond that. We need to get to the point of allowing these tests and and only make it for people who are aware of it. It doesn't have to be mandated. Just
Yeah.
for people who are
Want it.
educated, who are seeking it, should be given the opportunity to have this testing done so they can manage their health with a more complete understanding of what's going on.
Well, wouldn't that fall into the category of my body, my choice? Like, I want
That's
to test it, I want to understand.
that's right.
But
That's exactly.
that's another conversation. Before we started recording, Morley, you had mentioned you came across some new research recently
Yeah.
around hepcidin and I think hormones and a few things. What did you find?
Yeah, I had never Googled. Um, there's a lot of misperception about the concept of copper toxicity. A lot of people worship at that altar. They're convinced that there's a serious problem in people's body when it shows up elevated on a hair test or even a blood test, not realizing that what it's really telling us is that copper is low inside the tissue. That's where it's needed. Like 46% of our copper is in our bone marrow. Well, that's a pretty important place for it to be. 25% is in our muscles, and another 25% in our organs. So 1% of copper is in the blood. And when it's elevated, this whole response is, oh, this person is copper toxic. And so what I had never Googled was copper toxicity and hepcidin, the iron hormone. And it's absolutely fascinating what came back. Turns out that when copper becomes unbound from its protein, ceruloplasmin, copper levels are rising in the blood and in the hair, and it's triggering a rise in hepcidin. And what is the rise in hepcidin doing? Well, when hepcidin is rising, it means that it's breaking down the ferroportin protein. It's breaking down the iron recycling system, so the
Trapping
iron is
iron in
getting
the tissues.
iron is being trapped in the tissues, and then we have the illusion, the mirage of iron deficiency, when in fact it's a functional iron deficiency. It's not an absolute. And so to now realize that this whole hysteria around copper toxicity is in fact masking this hepcidin issue, which is masking the functional iron deficiency. And I think it's time to pull the curtain all the way back and say, okay, so what caused the copper to become unbound from its protein?
Mm.
It's not, the body doesn't just suddenly go rogue and say, yeah, I'm tired of having the copper inside the ceruloplasmin. Let's just let it rip. It's always in response to some chemistry, some chemical in the diet or in the medications that people use. And so things like ascorbic acid, well documented as causing a denaturing of ceruloplasmin. Citric acid, another major offender. Uh, Antibiotics, they've known this for a long time. Um, Hormone replacement therapy, birth control pills, these are all known disruptors of ceruloplasmin structure. And once the structure gets unfolded, the copper comes out like diarrhea. And it's unbound from ceruloplasmin, but it's very quickly bound by albumin or histidine or a protein called transcuprine, which is very akin to transferrin. And It has different properties though, the copper in that situation, but that mechanism of releasing the copper is being met with a hepcidin response, which is a very significant response. And it totally changes the whole understanding about what this low iron on a blood test is all about.
Morley, do you have a favorite whole vitamin C supplement that you recommend for people that can't do whole vitamin C foods for whatever reason? Like I have a couple of clients with Sjogren's and they just can't tolerate a lot of fruit and vegetables, even because of the bitterness, the tartness. So then
Interesting.
they need a whole food supplement.
Well, the two that I regularly recommend are either from Formula IQ. They have a wonderful 500 milligram capsule, or you can use Innate Response. I think theirs is like 450 milligrams, and it's a tablet. But those are two really solid products that will deliver. Um, with the Sjogren's, I would wonder what the status of their spleen is. Typically, all of these autoimmune conflicts are flowing out of a dysfunctional spleen. And again, we're back to um, too much iron uh, because of a
There's a lot of
misunderstanding of.
inflammation in people with Sjogren's. They're literally a walking inflammation bomb. Everything
Okay,
is like just inflamed.
okay. So that means that they are, I would say that they're low on copper and high in iron.
Oh, for
That's the recipe for inflammation.
these women, well, women, I mean, men can get it too, but I'm specifically working with these women, and they also have very heavy cycles too. And what did
Right?
we say in previous conversations? That very heavy menstrual cycles or bleeds are a reflection of your body trying to basically phlebotomize itself, flush out the extra
Exactly.
iron.
Yeah. It's the only real mechanism for lowering iron in the human body. There's no enzymatic nor hormonal mechanism. And so that just becomes a very powerful mechanism to allow that to take place. And I think that, again, we're back to lack of copper and too much iron. And just getting people to understand the whole premise of the root cause protocol allows them to begin to step into a more balanced state of metabolism with that information.
I'll have to check if those supplements are available in Canada. There is one by Now Foods that includes bioflavonoids and rose hips as well,
Okay.
and that's
Okay.
one that I tend to recommend. I like that one because if I'm correct, rose hips is more excuse me, rounded source of vitamin C and more
Yeah,
bio.
it is. Absolutely is. Yeah. Very
Uh,
counterintuitive. Why is it in roses? But it's there, thank God. But the other side that people may not know about is what are called tyrosinase inhibitors, very, very much used in the food system. And the when you talk about tyrosinase, you're typically referring to melanin, you know, hair color, skin color, eye color. And what I learned a couple weeks ago is that tyrosinase is really important for the membrane integrity of the red blood cell.
mm,
Well, that's a game changer. And so, how did I learn that? I was on a website talking about the use of um, retinol and different chemical agents to try to lighten the skin. And what they're very concerned about is these different chemicals that are being used in dermatology are considered tyrosinase inhibitors because they're trying to tone things down. They're trying to lighten the skin, and what they're always measuring to make sure that it's not going to provide any untoward results. They're measuring the membrane integrity of the red blood cell, and
mm.
so that's where the tyrosinase is playing out a very critical function that apparently very few people know about, which I was absolutely amazed at that. So it's important for people to realize all this stuff is connected, and we just have to be very careful about introducing synthetic forms of nutrients because it's going to have there will be second and third order effects inside the body.
So let me just summarize that and correct me if I'm wrong. People, especially ladies, if you want to maintain beautiful coloring in your skin and your eyes and your hair, you need copper.
That's exactly right. And there's a wonderful website, um, Lauren Loren Pickart, Pickart, He's the one who identified or discovered the GHK copper peptide in 1970,
Mm.
and then he developed a line of products. He wanted to put it in a supplement. The FDA would not let him do that, so he made transdermal products. And the name of the company is called ReverseSkinAging.com. And there's amazing research and articles on that website to talk about how central bioavailable copper is to healthy skin metabolism.
Yeah,
Very,
there's
very
so
important.
much around copper peptides now, and even copper being put into different skincare and facial routines, and even being
Right.
used in spas for whatnot.
That's
So
right.
we have a few minutes left, Morley, and I said I actually had something I wanted to bring up to you with a
Sure.
client. Now, this is really interesting. I love your opinion. I'm just going to read what she sent to me. I'm going to read it slow because there's a lot to take in here and see what you think of this. I will add that, well, let's just start this first. First of all, she was asking me about IV therapy. She went to a naturopath in town and got IV therapy for zinc. He recommends to go weekly. Her internal medicine guy tested all of her minerals in October. So she only sent me this a few days ago.
Mhm.
And my zinc to copper ratio was 9.5 to 15.9. So zinc was 9.5, copper was 15.9. Because of my genetics, we believe the zinc to be a big player in why my thyroid isn't working right or responding properly to natural desiccated thyroid, and why my DHEA, progesterone, and testosterone haven't been ideal, even though she is using them as well. I've been supplementing with 60 milligrams of zinc picolinate from Genestra, and my labs were redone at the beginning of February, and zinc to copper ratio is now 9.5 and 15.4. So it didn't change too much there
Mhm.
at all since October. I'm praying the zinc infusions are the missing key. Um, then I said, well, I'm speaking to Morley next week. Let me put this to him. I sent her my four previous podcasts with you. I said,
Right.
listen to this over the weekend before I speak to Morley so you have a more kind of rounded view on things. So then January zinc was 9.5, copper was 15.4. March just gone. So after she did 6 weeks of IV zinc therapy, zinc came up to 12 and copper went down to 13.9. She said, my dark circles disappeared. My taste has come back, which she didn't even realize was fully gone. And her skin has more vitality. The biggest change was, get this, my TSH went from 3, which tells me she was very inflamed, down
Right.
to 0.97, the lowest it's been in 10 years. My body is definitely responding to zinc. This is where it gets a little more complicated. The internal medicine guy started looking at her genetics, and she has a SLC30A8 AG variant, which makes someone who need more zinc support. She also has a DIO2 RS12883 5300 SNP, and that makes her have decreased conversion from T4 to T3, but it also means she has poor response to thyroid medicine. Then last year, when she was on desiccated thyroid, it was totally paradoxical. My TSH went through the roof, and my T3 and T4 dropped. Her hair fell out. Again, she's saying, I pray the zinc is the missing piece of this puzzle. So, listens to all your podcasts, blah, blah, blah. Just question with someone. So, this was where she put me to the question, but I wanted to give you the
Yeah.
context first. The question with someone who doesn't have ideal genetics for their zinc and their thyroid is systematically affected by low zinc, how do you go about supporting the zinc without risking the copper? Hold on, I'm almost finished. Um, then after listening to the podcast fully, she said, I think I'm going to keep the copper in my diet because initially she reached out to me and she had a load of copper supplements and she wanted to know if I knew anyone who wanted to buy them off her.
Oh
So
my
now
goodness.
she's
Yeah,
going to keep the copper.
right.
And um, but she doesn't understand why increasing the zinc and reducing the copper now with all these different variants has made such a difference in feeling better. And then lastly, she said, after hearing all about vitamin A, I looked into my genetics and I have a TT variant in BCM01, and that variant influences people's need
Mhm.
for vitamin A. And that's where I said, okay, let's just leave it at that. I'll ask Morley before it gets more confusing.
Yeah. Um, she's a copper desert, and she's only making it worse by focusing on zinc. And this idea that there's a ratio between copper and zinc is that's the work of Carl Pfeiffer. And I don't buy his theories. I don't buy his. Prior to Carl Pfeiffer, all of the great scientists and clinicians were obsessed with copper and iron because they were really focused on making energy, and they knew that they both played a role in the mitochondria. And iron is like your stove in your kitchen, holds the pots and pans, and copper is the chef in your kitchen, slicing, dicing, deciding what to eat, making sure the burners are right, things like that. And it's copper that's converting oxygen into water. It's not iron. It's not zinc. There's no metabolic role for zinc in the mitochondria. There is no metabolic role for zinc. People need to understand that. What does zinc do? It kills complex 4 in the mitochondria. What does zinc do? It kills the ferroxidase enzyme function in the in that critical ceruloplasmin enzyme. What does zinc do? It blocks copper uptake in our intestine. And so I recognize that her genetics is wonky, but she's worshiping at the altar of genetics. When in fact, the way it really works is if you have genetics, epigenetics, and energetics. Her energy producing ability is dysfunctional, which is affecting her epigenetics, which is affecting the genes.
Mhm.
Do the genes change when the energy changes? Absolutely does.
Gene
It's not
expression, yeah.
gene expression. And this idea that they are permanently flipped over and I can't work, that that is not true at all. And the gene jockeys have taken over science, saying that people are they're incapable of doing anything now. And I've got multiple research studies now where you can change and alter gene function by withholding copper from the diet. So what's interesting is she's probably reinforcing these copper or these genetic defects by focusing on zinc, not focusing on copper. She's not able to make energy, and all of her uh, she's she's inverted the whole paradigm of how the body works, and she's focusing on the genes, not the minerals. And so it's she's in a catch-22. And as long as she's getting zinc infusions, she's going to keep the triad of copper, iron, and zinc in a state of chaos. It's absolutely going to work against her long term.
So she's going, well, she mentions in the messages that how is it that she's feeling so much better after the IV zinc, plus it is clearly influencing the TSH, or shall we say the inflammatory system, because the TSH came down.
The inflammation is run by iron, not by zinc, and so flooding the body with zinc is going to affect iron status. I would really encourage her to do a full Monty iron panel that gets at 12 different markers inside the body to find out what is this doing to her copper status and her ceruloplasmin. How is zinc showing up in the blood now? But what's happening to iron? How has the transferrin protein changed? How is the percent saturation changing? How is ferritin changing? How is hemoglobin changing? These are critical factors. And how is this affecting her vitamin A and D, which need to be in relationship with each other? They're not equals inside the body. In fact, there should be 3 times more retinol in the blood than storage D. And so that the weakness of a lot of functional programs now is striving to make people feel better, but they're not metabolically better. The thing is, you can use um, cocaine to wake up in the morning, and you can use alcohol as a depressant to go back to sleep. And people do it all the time. And they both work. They really do work, but they are wickedly hard on the metabolism of the body.
Mhm.
And so I wouldn't recommend that people use cocaine and alcohol as your stimulant and then your depressant. And I think that's what's being done with the zinc. It all you have to do is do a simple Google search. What's the relationship of zinc to copper? And what she's going to find is she's going to create a state of copper deficiency, which is going to completely alter her energy metabolism. It's going to alter her fat metabolism. It's going to alter her thyroid. I appreciate that her T3, excuse me, her TSH is down, but that is not the way to solve it. I'd love to know what her TRH is. What is happening to thyroid regulating hormone in the face of this flooding
They
with
don't
zinc?
test that here, Morley.
No, they don't test it anywhere. Again, that's another one of those critical markers that should be a part of an ongoing panel to see how's the thyroid regulating hormone working. But no, we're not allowed to. So we pretend like it's not a problem. No, it is. It's a huge problem, and people need to be aware that they're being led down a primrose path because they aren't given access to TRH or hepcidin or ferroxidase, and they're like, these are blockbuster tests that would alter our understanding of the problem.
So your argument here, or response to her, is that maybe the zinc is affecting iron, and that's why she's
That's right.
feeling the benefits. So what the zinc is helping to liberate or free up the iron, or what's happening there?
I think it's overwhelming the iron metabolism, and so it's not recycling properly, and so it's in some way it's lowering the toxic impact of iron in the body. And again, these three metals are very powerful in our body, but iron and copper are the only they're called redox active, reduction, oxidation, active metals in the body. Zinc is not a redox active metal. Zinc is not a player in the mitochondria, but zinc is very reactive to iron and very reactive to copper. And at the doses that she's using, 60 milligrams, she's shutting down her copper metabolism, which would make me very nervous. I'd wonder, what is her PAM enzyme doing? What is her complex 4 doing? What is superoxide dismutase doing? And she'll say, oh, well, zinc is in the superoxide dismutase at a structural level. The
Mhm.
copper is the catalytic side. And I'm wondering, is the superoxide building in her body now that she's not even aware of it? And so it's just, um, I would not go down that path. I'd really want to find out what are the source symptoms that she's trying to solve, and zinc is not going to be the solution to, I don't think, very many of them.
So she's not feeling
That's
anything
just
now, but
that's
in
my
the
person.
yeah, in the long term, there may be some issues. You're feeling, quote, the benefits now, but how long can you keep doing
I,
IV therapy?
well, I'd also be worrying about her heart health. You start to flood 60 milligrams, and that's a lot. Start to put on a daily basis, put 60 milligrams in into the body. It's going to affect heart function because it's going to affect the copper bioavailability of the heart. And trust me, the heart runs on copper. It does not run on zinc. It's just she's really, in my opinion, skirting with disaster.
Hmm. Yeah, it is an interesting thing, and this is one of the things that annoys me about this genetic jockeys, as you said, which I haven't heard that before, was that then people get so caught up on the genetics and
Right.
but
That's
they're
right.
I'm not specifically referring to this lady because I know she's pretty great at her health and her lifestyle habits, but a lot of other people they get caught up on all these different SNPs and polymorphisms and they are not doing the basics.
No, that's exactly right. And one of my mentors was an MD PhD at NIH who met with Dr. Watson of Watson and Crick fame back in the 80s. Dr. Watson was one of the Nobel laureates for, you know, identifying the double helix of our DNA. And so he had this private audience, and Dr. Watson said, "So, Russ, what do you want to learn?" And he said, "Well, I want to understand the immutable, concrete-like nature of genes." And Dr. Watson burst into laughter. He said, "Russ, that's for the little people. They're flipping on and off all the time.
Yeah.
They're responding to stress. And so, especially oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is the flip side of energy. Because if you can't convert oxygen into two molecules of water, you're going to create superoxide or hydrogen peroxide or the hydroxyl radical.
Hmm.
Those are called oxidants, are also called reactive oxygen species. They're also called free radicals. Oh, you can have as many as you want. They're free, right? And so people don't realize that as soon as we're not making energy, we're making oxidative stress. And the, the whole focal point of that is what makes energy and what clears the oxidative stress is bioavailable copper. It is the ninja inside our body doing all the heavy lifting that no one knows about. And they've been trained to focus on genes. They've been trained to focus on hormones. They've been trained to focus on anything but what really runs the body. And minerals and vitamins are essential. And the phrase that I've been using of late, Shemaine, is that we are, as a species, we are designed to eat minerals and vitamins and to make hormones. We are not designed to eat hormones. And this idea that, oh, I can get a shot or I can get a um, uh, implant, they don't realize what they're doing. And there is a price to pay for focusing on hormones above the vitamins and minerals. And I'm not in any way downplaying the importance of the hormones, but they're supposed to be made by our body when it's healthy. And what's their overall function? To regulate mineral status in the body. That's really what hormones do. They're, and they've been turned into these supercharger chemicals, and it's just they're being misused, in my humble opinion. And we're not getting to the root reason why people need this hormone replacement therapy. And they are not bioidentical; they are chemoidentical. Chemically, they are very similar, but biologically, they're miles apart. And you start introducing that chemistry into the body, and the body's going to say, "Where is this coming from?" And no one's giving any concerns about that. I think it's a very dangerous part of our medical response now is to give HRT, which is totally disrupting our immune system and our body's response to stress. So I,
This
I
is,
just think it's all upside
yeah,
down.
it's a concern of mine, and I know a few of my colleagues. So I am a hormone therapist, so I use a lot of hormone therapies, but only after I've done nutrition, sleep, lifestyle habits, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Then maybe by week 5 or 6, we might look at hormones. But a lot of the time, you don't really need to once you've kind of addressed everything else. They have already started to feel better. But this is overlooked. But in context of what you're saying, if a woman goes to their medical provider or gynecologist and they're just saying, I have this, and this problem, the doctor just gives them a prescription, completely overlooks the nutrition
That's
aspect
right.
of things, the lifestyle. So now, yeah, we're giving them hormones because we want them to feel better, but not starting at the root cause and working our way up to hormones.
The most important question that's not being asked in the conventional doctor's office is why do I not feel right? Why is my vitamin D off? If you think it's off, why is my iron low on the blood test? Why are my hormones not expressing in the blood test? And that question, why, is so important. And all we're doing is flipping into this very contemporary solution that's very popular, but that doesn't mean it's right. But it's very, very popular. And people are convinced that they need the hormones, when in fact, what they need is stress management, a better diet, and mineral and vitamin therapy. And I think the point about stress, just to reinforce it for your followers, there's two principal models of stress that were developed in the 1980s. There's chronic social defeat syndrome and repeated restraint stress. These are the two preferred models for studying stress in animals. When were they applied to the two-legged rats? In 2020. Chronic social defeat syndrome, repeated restraint. Don't you leave your house. Don't you dare go out. And what that does, those two models of stress cause a rise of hepcidin. What does hepcidin do? Shuts down the iron recycling system. And then people get a blood test and they're told, oh, you're anemic. And then what are they given? Iron. And what does iron do? It only augers down the metabolism even further. And so people don't realize that when they're stressed out, they are causing a shutdown of their iron recycling system, which is causing a breakdown of their metabolism. And what doctor, what practitioner says, tell me about your stress. Let's let's pull the curtain back. Let's really peel back. What's really bugging you? What are the issues you can't seem to resolve in your life? And what are you doing to address them? But what are you doing to address the fear that you have that you're stuck? And within the root cause protocol, we spell fear differently. It's FE-AR. And that way we see the symbol for iron. Because when you're in a state of fear, if you have chronic stress, you are in a state of fear. But when you're in a state of fear, you're a magnet for iron. And that iron is because the iron recycling system is shut down, the iron's being sequestered into the recycling macrophages, being sequestered into the tissue of the body, and it festers.
It
When iron
increases
is,
inflammation and you feel worse than ever.
that's right. And when iron is not in circulation or in recycling, it will fester, just as you said. And that's the origin of all chronic disease, 100% of it. And it's just getting people to realize that there's thousands of different descriptions of imbalance, but they all start with the same mechanism. There's a copper, iron, oxygen, three-ring circus that needs to be regulated in the body. And that's really the focus of the root cause protocol.
What I'm getting just thinking about this lady I just mentioned is that what she should really focus on because does have a lot of stress in her life. That's why she popped back into my head. So she should be focusing on stress management as much as possible, copper, and a good form of vitamin A. They should be her top tiers right now.
Right. Yeah.
And
I mean,
maybe
I just,
saving the money from the zinc IVs and using it on some on a vacation.
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, again, within the RCP, we're very clear about what to stop. And one of the stops is stop taking zinc, stop taking iron, stop taking vitamin D only. We really promote cod liver oil, which has vitamin D in it. But taking a vitamin D supplement, oh, as a standalone, don't do that. It's very, very problematic.
Morley, I don't take iron. I take copper, but I feel pretty good. I don't take iron, I feel pretty good.
That's great. No, I mean, I think it's a more natural response. The environment used to have copper in it. And in the last 100 years, there's been this wholesale breakdown where food gets refined, farming chemicals have changed over the last century, and there's a dramatic difference in the mineral availability in food today than there was 60 years ago. And so we just need to be mindful of that and aware of the importance of nutrient dense food. And as you said, stress management, and just we got to get out of the way of the body's ability to respond to itself. And it needs energy to do that. The detox pathways all require energy, especially in the liver. That's an absolute critical requirement.
Last question, Morley, because you mentioned glyphosate earlier. What is the mineral concentration difference between conventionally sprayed foods and our organic foods? Is there a big difference in the mineral content?
Well, there would be, and there's research to back that up. I mean, there was a major study done back in the year 2000, but I'm sure it's been updated. It was at Rutgers University, and it was a striking difference between conventional and organic. A lot of investment in regenerative farming now, which is very significant. And the challenge we've got is that the nutrient tables that we're so reliant on, with all these different apps that you can get on your phone, those nutrient tables haven't been updated since the 1950s. Well, that's kind of alarming.
Mhm.
And it should be the job of the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, should be updating it, but apparently they don't. And schools of nutrition should be updating it, but apparently
So that's
they don't.
75 years pretty much since it's been done.
Yep, yep. And so we don't really know we don't know what we're eating. We think
Mhm.
we do because the table says this is what you get, but we're not really getting that. And there have been enough ancillary studies of nutrient density that there's been a major loss in the nutrients in the food we're eating. And so it just becomes another part of the agenda to reverse the course that we're on and be much more mindful of what are the nutrients in the food I'm eating. Um, it's just like we were in LA recently and had the most amazing meal. It was spectacular. Uh, but even within that, even for all of the organic meats that were in there and the retinol that was in there, we didn't know exactly what we were eating. Again, we base it on what we know those foods used to be,
Or
and I
used
think
to
what we have to
contain,
do,
yeah.
and I think we just have to step back and start to analyze what am I really eating, and the more contemporary tests of organ meats, the minerals have flipped. They're not as strong as they used to be, and people don't realize that that's taking place day to day in our food paradigm. So it's a very dynamic world out there.
Do you think we would ever get to a stage where certain foods just completely stop containing certain nutrients or minerals, where they drop so low they're zero and that food no longer contains whatever it is?
Great question. I have no idea. You would think that um, vegetables need a certain mineral expression in order to be that vegetable. I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know
that's
how that works. I don't know the plant genetics well enough to know can they hybridize these plants to the point where they look like they're healthy, but in fact they're empty. I mean, I always talk about we are Swiss cheese eating Swiss cheese. I don't know how prevalent that is, but there has been repeated studies done that the nutrient density of food has changed in our lifetime, certainly in my lifetime, and um, and that's a very significant fact that we have to live with and work around.
interesting. Because I mean, like you'd wonder if magnesium, for example, was so depleted out of a leaf, a piece of spinach, would it still be a piece of spinach then? Would it look different? Would it be structurally
Uh,
different? Uh,
Great question.
at what
You're talking.
stage are we going to get to that point?
I don't know, but you're talking to the wrong guy because I don't know the plant genetics well enough to know. I just know where the smoking guns are. And farming is very different today than it was for our great grandparents. And we've been led to believe that it's safe. I don't think it is. And I think it's changed. It's just follow the tenets of the Weston A. Price and Price Pottinger communities. They're very adamant about this, and we just have to deal with it as a society.
Well, Morley, thank you. Thank you for your time again. Lots of
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah. Always happy to have this conversation. I can't wait to hear the blowback from your client. And again, if they decide to do that blood work, I would be delighted to interpret it just to see what's really going on. I
Yeah.
think she's um, pursuing a strategy based on insufficient information. That would be my
Yeah.
interpretation. So
Okay. Well, I'll let her know, Morley. Thank you for your time, and we will chat again soon in a few months.
I look forward to it. Thanks so
Thank you.
much.